we're going to sew the yoke and our waistband. First, we're going to close the side seams. Again, we're using a 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I'm ironing mine apart because I do think that the fabric is, quite thick, and I don't want it to be too bulky. So I don't really need pins for this at all. I just line up the edges, and then I do my 1 centimeter seam allowance, and I do the same as I did on the skirt. I just swivel this round and put it straight back under, and sew here, locking in my stitches in again, and save myself some thread. Now we're going to iron the seam flat first, like we did before, and then we're going to iron the seam apart, and it really does make a difference. Maybe not when you have a linen like this, but if you're using any heavier fabric, it makes a load of difference. Now, the buttonhole placket here is going to sit exactly on top of each other. It overlaps 2.5 centimeters. And I'm now going to work my waistband, and for the waistband I'm going to put interfacing on either side. The interfacing pattern piece did not have a seam allowance, so it's not too thick in the seam allowance. We don't want that in there, and the center has got the elastic in it, so we don't need to interface that at all. When we iron on interfacing, it's always the same. You leave it on for 8 seconds to the next place, leave it for 8 seconds, and then it should be securely stuck too. So I think I'm going to cut this one short. Just put it on the other side as well, count to 8, and it'll be fine and dandy. Now we're going to fold over our waistband lengthways in half, and we're closing both edges. And again, we do the same thing where we just swivel it round, lock in our stitches, and sew it in one. It just saves you a bit of thread, that's all. Get a pin and move out the corner so it's nice and smooth, and then we're going to go and give that a jolly good press as well. Just lift it out. Beautiful. Good press. And we also want the top edge of the waistband ironed now, so we're going to move the edges on top of each other and iron it all the way. Right to the other side. And now comes the point where magic happens. So you open up your waistband like that, and then you take the yoke, and that's also still open, isn't it? So we're going to put that on here, right side up, and I'm moving my waistband up to the top of the yoke. And you're going to move the seam line onto the crease, and this will give you the most beautiful flat edge when you're done with it. So you need to pin the seam line to your crease, and you pin it right to the end of the facing. So that is a way that it's done in industry a lot for clothes, and it makes your life a lot easier than trying it any other way. You will not get that really smooth edge. Okay, so you're starting to pin there. We'll do the same on the other side. So you get your seam allowance, open out, and put it on the crease exactly. I think sometimes this with the diagram is very hard to show, and if you see it in the fabric like this, then you'll never do it differently again, because it's like really, really easy. Right, so I pinned that in, and in my case, I hadn't marked my waistband, of course, in true form. It does say that in the instructions, but I forgot, of course. So I'm just stretching it to see where it fits, and of course that goes as well. So I'm just putting on the one side of this and leave the other one hanging, and it fits on perfect, right? So now I just go and put all my edges on top of each other and pin it all the way along. So nice. This linen is really lovely, actually. And it wasn't that expensive, but this is not a Michael Miller one. I got that on the market. And so it's always a bit of a problem that linen is so expensive. It can be like between $8 and $16, whereas I paid $5 for this and it was fantastic. I wish I could magic it to all of you. Right, so now I'm going to go over to the sewing machine and we're going to sew it on from the start of the facing all the way around to the, end of that facing. Again, you want to keep to the 1 centimeter seam allowance here. And sew it on. Move the pins out as you get to them, not before. And make sure that nothing folds the opposite way to how it should fold. This is a really nice way to create a very flat waistband. Sometimes they can get a bit bulky when you have also the elastic in there and all that. And this method really does give you a very smooth, very flat finish, which is what you want really. There we are. We have arrived on the other side. So open it out and sew to the end of the facing. And voila, super smooth finish. Then you iron the seam into the waistband. Whoops. And now we get a really nice finish. You want to measure though that it's the same all the way along. And if you haven't quite ironed it right, goodness knows why it isn't. I don't know what I did here. I did have it edge to edge, but you never know. So do check yourself, because at this point, it's easy still. We're going to overlock this seam here all the way around, and then it's just going to stand into the skirt. Before you do, check that it's actually correct here, that the height is the same from both sides, because you can still change it. If you don't check it now and it's like out, then it's a bit, when you've overlocked it or serged it, you'll have to unpick all that overlocking or serging, which is not very nice. Now, when I pull it down, you can see that this is already going to give you a flat result. But to make it even flatter, you want to snip here just where the seam goes, so that one goes up and one goes down, and that will give you a very, very flat area here where we have all these seam allowances together. It makes a lot of difference, and it's really, really flat now. And on the other side, I do exactly the same. I cut just here, and then one seam allowance goes up and the other one is down. And then I can fold this back as well. And that way I get a perfectly flat seam, and so that it doesn't go up or down anymore, because it will try to move in there if you don't pin it. I put this pin in just to hold it in place. And that's it. Now we can go on to the next chapter and put the elastic in.